Hi, my name is Madeline. Welcome to my loose watercolor ocean tutorial. We will paint this fun little beach scene together. Here are the supplies that we will be using today. The size of the brushes that you need for your painting will depend on the size of your paper. I will share as I'm painting what colors that I use. Feel free to use a color palette that suits your style. I will have links in the description below of all the supplies that I have used. Let's get started. I have my paper right here and I have my masking tape, and I'm just going to tape my paper down on all four sides because we will be starting off with wet on wet technique. We are going to start off by using masking fluid to paint the tops of some of the umbrellas and towels that will be on the beach. Masking fluid basically protects the white space of our paper from the paint so that once we've finished painting the background, we can rub off the masking fluid and we can paint these smaller areas. I'm using a silicone brush, which I like because I don't have to worry about ruining a regular brush or having to deal with making a regular brush soapy. And since we're painting really basic shapes, just circles and squares, I think using a silicone brush is nice because we can just wipe the masking fluid right off once we're done. So right now I am just painting a few circles and squares of different sizes, and this is going to be the umbrellas and towels that we see because our painting today is going to be like an aerial view, so we are looking at the beach from above. And once you're happy with how many umbrellas or towels you have, we can dry this layer of masking fluid with a hot air tool. So now that it's dry, I'm going to take a flat brush and I'm just going to wet our paper evenly with some water, some clean water, before we start painting. And now we're going to start painting the background wash. So I have my mop brush, which I like for painting the background wash because it picks up a lot of pigment. And I'm starting off with a color called Anthracnone Blue. I would say it's really similar to ultramarine. It's just slightly cooler. But you can use whatever blue you want. You can use cobalt, phthalo blue, or whatever blue you have on your palette. So this upper portion of our piece is going to be the ocean that's further away from the beach. So this part of the painting is going to be a little bit darker. And then below the blue, I'm actually going to use some turquoise. And this is going to be the beach right in front of the sand where the waves are crashing. And the turquoise that I'm actually using is cobalt turquoise, but we basically just want like a light bluish green right before the sand area. And then after we paint the turquoise portion, I'm going to use yellow ochre and some raw sienna. So the raw sienna is going to be touching the turquoise, and this is going to be the part of the beach that is wet from the waves. And then underneath that, I use a little bit of yellow ochre and buff titanium to paint the portion of the beach that isn't wet. So I noticed that after our first wash, the colors are a little bit light, and I know that once we dry the paper, the colors are going to fade even more. So I'm grabbing a little bit more blue just to darken the top to give it a little bit more contrast. And I'm also going to add more cobalt turquoise and raw sienna to the beach so that once we've dried our paper, the colors don't look too washed out. And now that I'm good with the colors, I'm going to get my hot air tool and I'm going to dry this layer. Now that our first layer is dry, I'm going to grab some white gouache and we're going to paint some waves breaking on our beach. And so while I was filming this tutorial, I used a round brush to do some dry brushing for the waves. I wasn't totally happy with it, so I think if I were to do this again, I probably would get a flat brush and kind of use it horizontally so the long bristles are sort of facing like up and down, and I would kind of make left and right swipes. But I used a round brush for this recording, and so it is what it is. I think I also used a little bit too much white. I probably would have kept it to just that first layer. I probably wouldn't have added that second layer, but I think adding the white gouache sort of just gives the illusion of the foamy waves as the waves crash on the beach. So however you want to paint this part with a dry brush, feel free to paint it however you would like. And dry brushing, all it means is you take a dry brush and you dip it into your paint and you get that kind of scratchy texture. Rather than using a wet brush, you would get really smooth brush strokes, and we sort of want that chopped up texture. And then now I'm going to grab my glue eraser and I'm going to rub off the masking fluid. You don't have to use a glue eraser if you don't have one. You can just use your fingers to rub it off. And then the last part of this tutorial is just taking some paints and filling in the masking fluid areas with colorful umbrellas or towels and little people walking around the beach. And so I had used just regular watercolor the first time around, and after it dried I realized that it was like kind of light, and so I actually got some gouache the second time around and I colored it in with gouache to make the umbrellas and the towels just pop a little bit more. And I also feel like I made my people like a little bit too small, so I made them slightly bigger. And so here you can see it after it dried. I used a little bit of black pen to kind of fill in some details, which I also didn't really love. So here is some gouache that I squeezed out onto this tiny little palette. I used purple, pink, brown, and a little bit of cerulean because I wanted those little beach towels to just really pop. And so here I am just kind of coloring it in to make it a little bit brighter because I want them to be contrasted with the pale beach. And so if you don't have gouache, you don't need to use gouache. You could just use maybe thicker or more creamy watercolor. But I had gouache on hand, so I just grabbed some colors and I just darkened my umbrellas and towels and made my little people just a tiny bit bigger. And that's it for this super easy, fun, simple, and loose watercolor beach tutorial. If you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to hit subscribe, and if you like my artwork, please check out my Patreon.